He was just a forgotten serial number K9 Rex 83 stamped useless and awaiting destruction. But in those scarred eyes and that desperate silence, Ranger Felix saw something the entire system had overlooked: a warrior who had never surrendered. And from that moment on, an unexpected journey began, not to train a dog, but to save 2 souls. Dangling from the plastic tag in front of kennel number 80, cold letters were printed: Menbezerai, breed Belgian Malinois. Sex, female. 4 years. Status, discarded. Aggression, uncontrollable. Displays fear response under pressure. Unfit for service. Recommended for euthanasia. In the farthest corner of the transitional training wing at the Federal Canine Training Institute, beneath the cold glow of fluorescent lights and the sharp sting of antiseptic, the Malinois lay curled up, nearly invisible in the shadows that the light no longer bothered to reach. Her once sleek yellow-gray coat was now patchy and rough. A harsh scar ran down her left shoulder to the elbow, where torn flesh had never regrown fur. Her upright ears had slackened, and her amber eyes were cloudy, as if they carried a war. No one else had seen. No one stopped at Kennel 83. People flocked to admire the robust German shepherds, nodded approvingly at the eager Labradors ready for search duty. They were looking for the next soldier for private security firms for breeding, or simply for personal protection. But she was a system error, a name crossed off a liability asset no one wanted to touch. Until Felix walked in. He wore a weathered ranger uniform, a moss-green jacket bearing the Olympic National Park logo boots, still caked with dry mud from the temperate rainforests of the Pacific Northwest. People stared as if he'd wandered into the wrong auction. No one understood why a park ranger was attending an official decommission auction for dogs deemed unfit for public service. Felix wasn't there out of curiosity. He was there because of an old email from a police friend, which included a list of final candidates. Among the dozens of names, one line made him pause. Malinois 83 unstable response. Scar from escape attempt. He had seen that kind of reaction before in the eyes of comrades who came back shattered after a failed rescue op. In the mirror each morning, every September, the month of the landslide he'd survived, while others hadn't. Felix walked slowly past each kennel. He didn't call out, didn't wave or whistle. He observed the way he used to track black bear prints or smell wildfire smoke from 2 miles away. When he reached Kennel 83, he stopped, kneeled, said nothing. They remained like that man and dog for nearly 2 minutes. No movement, not even a heavy breath, until the Malinois slowly raised her head and her amber eyes quietly locked onto his. The look of a wild animal, but of a fighter who had been betrayed, had feared, had fought, and now had nothing left to lose. Felix swallowed the lump rising in his throat. That's not the gaze of something dangerous, he thought. That's the gaze of a soldier who's seen too much. That one. Not worth it. A voice came from behind Felix, blending apathy with warning. It was the auction supervisor, a burly man holding a clipboard with the look of someone all too familiar with signing off on destruction. Felix didn't turn around right away. He kept his gaze locked with the amber eyes in front of him, as if man and dog were conversing in a silent language. Finally, he stood up, his voice low and steady. What happened to her? The supervisor glanced down at his list. K9 Baser 83, Belgian Malinois, trained to sniff explosives on the southern border. Showed promise at first, but then she cracked. One day she'd do great, the next she'd retreat into the corner of her kennel, shaking. During a live fire test, she panicked, broke out, fled, disrupted the entire session, nearly bit a trainer when forced back in. He pointed at the scar on her shoulder. Got injured trying to scale a barbed wire fence. Never bounced back since. "What's her name?" Felix asked. "No name. Just a code, Baser 83. She's about to be taken off the living list." Felix said nothing. He didn't need more data. The wound on her body said more than any report could. A physical injury could heal. But those eyes, if she could still look a man in the face without barking, without flinching, there was still hope. The auction began like some dry, bureaucratic ritual. People stood scattered about. The most promising dogs were presented first, candidates still viable for security firms. Prices started at several hundred and reached into the thousands. Then came the final kennels. The death row line. People walked past without pause, but 83 female Belgian Malinois. Former explosives trainee, failed psychological and behavior control assessments. Starting bid $200. The announcer's voice was as dull as if reading an office liquidation inventory. No one moved. 200. Felix spoke up firm and clear. The entire room turned to look at him, as if they'd just witnessed a madman. 200 once. The announcer scanned the room, clearly surprised. Twice. Sold to Ranger Felix 200. A pen stroke on a clipboard. An ending. A beginning. Half an hour later, Felix stood beside his old pickup truck, facing the trainer holding the leash. The dog, now called Rex, was hunched at the end of the lead, eyes locked on Felix's body, taut, like a tripwire, ready to snap. "No warranty, no returns. All risk is yours," the trainer emphasized as he handed over the leash. But then in a softer voice, his eyes unexpectedly gentled. "Listen, I once thought Rex could be a legend. But something happened in her unit. Rumor is they tested some special methods. Harsh. Off the books." Felix took the leash without comment. No words needed. Just a nod. "Thanks. Not for the warning, but for the rare flicker of compassion in a system used to discarding the broken." He didn't force Rex into the truck. He opened the back door, laid down a thick blanket, leaving enough space for her to settle. Then he pulled out a kibble from his pocket, placed it on the ground between them. "No commands, no pressure. We're not in a rush." "Take your time," he murmured. Rex didn't eat, but she never took her eyes off him. 5 minutes passed. Cold wind swept across the parking lot, rustling distant trees. And then, with no command, no leash pulling, Rex stepped into the truck on her own. Didn't look back. Didn't need to. Felix shut the door, slid into the driver's seat, checked the rearview mirror. Rex sat still in the back seat. Her eyes no longer filled with fear, only a quiet anticipation. "It's a 2-hour drive back to the forest. I figure we'll have time to find a name that fits." Felix smiled faintly, gripping the wheel. "Or maybe Rex will do just fine." The truck rolled out of the lot, carrying with it a soul the system had discarded, and a man broken. In silence, 2 survivors stepping into a journey, neither of them knew where it would lead. Twilight had set in as Felix's pickup truck turned onto the forest trail leading to the cabin. Deep in the eastern stretch of Olympic National Park, the vehicle crawled slowly over muddy ruts left by the rain tires, crunching dead leaves and releasing the earthy scent of deep woods. Rex remained still in the back seat. No whining, no movement, like a living shadow. The cabin appeared after a bend in the road, modest with dark wooden walls and a tin roof speckled with rust, as if it too was bracing to survive one storm at a time. No fence, no porch light, just a dim glow flickering from a small window thanks to the wood stove Felix had set on a timer before he left. Felix turned off the engine. Without a word, he stepped out and opened the back door. Then he stepped back. No calling, no tugging at the leash. He simply waited. Rex jumped down. No hesitation. She moved like a special ops soldier, eyes scanning nose, pulling in every breeze, ears upright, and tuned to every tremor. But this time, she didn't retreat. She stood exactly 3 paces away from Felix, far enough to run, if needed, close enough to hear his heartbeat if she wished. "This is home," Felix said. His voice low, but not rough. "At least for me. For you. We'll see." He walked up the steps. Rex followed. No coercion. Inside the cabin was simple but tidy, a work table, covered in topographic maps, patrol schedules, and a radio. A compact gas stove with a few battered pots. A wooden cabinet stocked with first aid gear. A single bed built into the far wall. Gray sheets tucked in tight with a drawer underneath, holding weapons and flashlights. Felix filled a ceramic bowl with water and set it by the stove. No pressure. Drink when you feel safe. Rex didn't move, just watched. Felix sat on an old wicker chair by the fire. The flickering light danced on his face, once youthful now, weathered by years of silence. A scar marked his jaw. His back was straight, the way military discipline never truly fades. He poured water into a tin cup and sighed. 3 years ago, I was buried in a landslide on the West Trail. 2 hikers were trapped with me. I survived. 1 didn't. Rex raised her head slightly, not in alarm, but as if listening. I should have seen the signs. Maybe that's why I can't sleep when it rains. Silence blanketed the room. The fire crackled. Some say I should take medical leave, but I think maybe there's still something I can do. If I can't save myself, maybe I can save someone. Rex didn't move, but her eyes had changed, no longer hollow like in the kennel. Now they were alert, watching. "You've got scars, too," Felix said, glancing at the scorched patch on her left shoulder. "But I don't believe you're broken. And if I'm wrong, well, at least we'll be wrong together." Moments later, Rex slowly approached the bowl. She lowered her head and lapped a few sips. Then she looked up at Felix. Felix gave a faint smile. "You just passed the first test." He got up and poured some dry food into a bowl, placing it several feet away from the dining area. No commands, no force, just an option. And again, Rex made the right choice. No lunging, no suspicion. She stepped forward and ate. Night fell. Wind rustled through the treetops like the voices of those long gone. Felix laid a thick blanket by the stove. "This spot, if you want it. I won't lock the door, won't cage you in. You can leave, but I'll be here waking at 5:30 as usual." Rex didn't leave. After eating, she returned to the front door, lay down, rested her head on her front paws, alert, but not trembling. Before turning in, Felix said one final thing, whether to Rex or to himself. It was unclear. Maybe we're both survivors of an explosion, but maybe, this time, we won't have to survive alone. In the dark, Rex didn't whine or bark. She just let out a long, quiet breath. A beginning, silent without fanfare, but full of promise. The first morning between Rex and Felix began in the characteristic silence of the deep forest. No alarm clocks, no honking cars, only the sound of sparrows calling a stream, babbling somewhere behind the hill, and the gentle cracking of wood in the nearly burned-out stove. Felix woke up at 5:30 as usual, a habit forged over many years in the military, and further reinforced after the accident. He didn't sit up like a soldier, but lay there for a moment to listen to the sounds of the cabin and to confirm something he hadn't dared hope for the day before: the steady breathing of another living being. Rex was still lying near the door, same posture as the night before, keeping watch, not resting. But when Felix sat up, she didn't flinch, just lifted her head, ears twitching slightly, watching. "Good morning," Felix said, voice hoarse. He didn't wait for a response, didn't expect one. He stepped into the washroom, splashed cold water on his face, and changed into his familiar olive-green ranger uniform. While brewing coffee and cooking oatmeal, he continued speaking one-sidedly to Rex, not to command, but to grow familiar. Today's patrol is over at Clearwater Gorge, a few rock slides after last week's storm. People still try to go in, even with warning signs up. Rex tracked his every move, but didn't interrupt. "I don't know if you've ever done a patrol before, but if you want, you can come along." Felix opened the cabin door. Didn't call her, just stepped outside. Like last night, he trusted let Rex decide. Less than a minute later, soft footsteps followed him. Rex came out, stood by the pickup truck's door, and waited. No urgency, no panic. Just like a teammate awaiting the signal to deploy. Felix chuckled softly. "Yeah, I thought so too. Nothing exciting staying home." The road to the main ranger station wound through old-growth forest. Fallen trees still blocked parts of narrow roads, and muddy patches made the tires slip slightly on sharp bends. But Rex sat calmly in the passenger seat, unafraid. She watched through the window, eyes missing nothing beneath the forest canopy. "You make me feel like I'm not alone in this truck," Felix muttered, hands steady on the wheel. "I don't remember the last time I had company." At the ranger station, the morning air was quiet but bustling. Other rangers prepped for their day. Radios crackled weather updates, maps were spread on tables, the coffee pot whirred endlessly. Rex stayed close beside Felix. Curious eyes turned toward her. "Who's this, Felix?" a young ranger asked. "Stray dog, retired K9. Felix replied simply. "Her name's Rex. She's on trial." Rex didn't bark, didn't jump, just stood there. Calm. Her eyes scanned each person as if she were evaluating them, not the other way around. "Careful with that one," another ranger whispered. "Heard she got dropped from the key program for unstable behavior." Felix heard, but didn't react. He simply rested a hand gently on Rex's back. Not petting, not comforting. Just a statement, "I'm here." And Rex, oddly enough, didn't recoil, didn't walk away. She stood still, breathing steadily, and turned her gaze from the speaker to Felix as if asking. "So, what's next?" Felix smiled. "Let's patrol." Out on the trail, Rex began to show what Felix had only vaguely sensed on the first day: an extraordinary sensitivity. She stopped when the scent of the soil felt off. She veered left when a strange noise echoed from a nearby slope. And most notably, as they neared a slick curve in the path, she suddenly froze, growled low eyes fixed on the ground. Felix checked. A portion of the trail had collapsed slightly overnight. The surface was a thin layer of dirt covering a hollow pocket beneath, enough to snap an ankle if someone stepped carelessly. Felix whistled. "Good job, Rex." She looked at him, ears perked. Her eyes seemed brighter. That was the first time Felix praised her. When dusk fell, they returned to the station. Rex showed no signs of fatigue. Felix, however, felt something in his chest lighter than usual, as if today he had done something more meaningful than just completing his duty. That night in the cabin, Rex didn't lie near the door anymore. She lay closer to the stove on the thick blanket, her back to the wooden wall, her belly facing Felix. And before turning out the light, Felix said, Tomorrow, we'll do it again, if you're up for it. Rex didn't respond, but the quiet nod in her eyes was answer enough. The first rain of the season poured down on Olympic National Park like a harsh trial. The initial droplets tapping against the cabin roof startled Rex. She jolted up from the blanket near the wood stove, body tense, eyes darting around. Felix awoke too, his ranger instinct switching on like a circuit breaker. "It's okay, Rex," he reassured her, though his voice was still thick with sleep. But he saw it. This wasn't the reaction of a dog who disliked rain. This was fear. A deep-rooted, near-instinctive fear. Rex moved to the cabin door, standing motionless like a statue. Back arched slightly, hackles raised. A bolt of lightning flashed outside. She let out a faint hiss. Not a bark, not a growl, but the labored breath of a creature trying not to collapse. Felix sat down, held out his hand. Not touching her, just speaking softly. Something happened when it rained, didn't it? He didn't sleep at all that night. He sat against the cabin wall, eyes never leaving Rex. The animal trembling gently in the darkest corner. He didn't coax her out, didn't try to pet her, didn't whisper comforting words. He just stayed there, his presence like a marker, an anchor. Around 2 a.m., she crawled out from the shadows, not all the way to him, but closer. Close enough for him to hear her broken breathing, close enough to know she was trying to fight it. Felix whispered like telling his own story. I was the same. First time I got trapped after a landslide, one clap of thunder, and I'd lunge for my rifle like I was still in a war zone. He chuckled softly. You're not the only one carrying scars. Rex turned to look at him. No growl, no retreat. Just a look. And in those eyes, for the first time in years, Felix saw something soften. The next morning it was still drizzling, but something had changed. Felix poured coffee, and Rex stood on the porch, head lifted toward the sky. Rain pattered gently on her muzzle, but she didn't shy away. No longer afraid, just alert, as if she was testing her fear itself. Felix stood beside her, saying nothing. After a long pause, he quietly said, I don't know what they did to you, but I know one thing, you're still here fighting. Rex turned to him. A brief moment, but long enough for Felix to know she'd heard. She understood. By late morning, they were patrolling a trail near Thunder Creek. After the rain, the stream was muddy and full of debris, branches, stones. Felix noted the condition in his work journal. Rex stayed close, not ahead, not behind. Always within 2 meters, just enough to respond if needed. At a curve near a landslide site, a dry branch suddenly crashed down a few meters away. The sound echoed like gunfire. Felix flinched, but Rex reacted more intensely. She dropped to the ground, curled in on herself, whimpered not from pain, but from memory. Felix didn't touch her. He sat beside her hands, resting calmly on his thighs, breathing evenly. He whispered like reciting a spell. You're in Olympic Forest, not a training yard. No more leashes, no more commands. This is the forest. This is freedom. A long while passed before Rex lifted her head. Her eyes were wet, not from the rain. Felix gave a simple nod. Good girl. That night, for the first time, Rex didn't lie near the door. She lay beside Felix's cot, her head resting on the extra blanket he'd placed nearby. No leash, no command, no forced obedience, only trust. Felix looked at her, then lay back on his bed. You don't have to overcome everything in one day, he said. We've got time, and I'm here. When he turned off the flashlight, a soft sound followed a long breath from Rex. Not of fear, but of release. For the first time since arriving at the cabin, she truly slept. Friday morning sunlight filtered through the thick canopy after the rain, casting soft golden beams like silk across the cabin. Rex stepped outside without waiting for a command. She didn't run, didn't react with hypervigilance. She simply walked along the forest edge, ears perked, nose twitching slightly, to catch the scent of post-rain wilderness. Felix stood quietly on the porch, hot coffee in hand. He didn't call her back, didn't monitor every step like he might with an unstable working dog. For the first time since the auction, he let her simply be no cages, no leashes, just nature. When Rex returned, she carried a decaying pine branch and gently dropped it at Felix's feet. A meaningless gesture to anyone else, but to Felix, it was a miracle. A voluntary gesture, a thread of connection. "Want to start over?" he asked, crouching down, picking up the branch and giving it a light toss. Rex sprang forward, not with prey instinct, but to play. Her eyes lit up, paws lifting off the ground in a playful bound. Not quite an ordinary dog, but a creature being reborn. That whole morning they trained in the dirt clearing in front of the cabin. Not military-style drills, but memory exercises. Felix used positive reinforcement when Rex obeyed, and he didn't bark. The order just gently pointed and rewarded her with a bit of dried chicken. When she responded to come, he patted his chest, and she came hesitantly, but not fearfully. "You remember, don't you?" he asked. Rex tilted her head. It seemed the harsh training of the past still echoed in her memory, but every time she responded, the pain came with it, making her flinch from instinct. Felix understood. He didn't need her to start over from scratch. He just needed her to believe that this time obeying didn't mean pain. No shocks, no yelling, no violence. Only rewards and recognition. That afternoon, Felix took Rex to the main ranger station. All eyes turned toward them the moment they walked in a tall, muscular Malinois, silent as a blade, walking beside the famously solitary ranger. Marcus, the station chief, stepped out of his office, clipboard in hand. When he saw Rex, his brow furrowed. "That the number 83, he asked. Felix nodded. "Her name's Rex now. She's starting over." "Felix," Marcus lowered his voice. "I know you're good. But that one, she was pulled for a reason. You can't bring a failed dog into the heart of a rescue operation." "She didn't fail," Felix replied. "She was betrayed." They locked eyes for a moment. Then Marcus finally nodded. "All right, but you're fully responsible. And don't bring her into the field until I personally assess her." Felix didn't respond. But as they turned to leave, Rex kept exactly a half-step distance, didn't pull the leash, didn't hesitate. Marcus watched them go. For the first time, there was a flicker of doubt in his certainty. Back at the cabin, the sky had just begun to clear when a strong gust rattled the window pane. Rex, startled, bolted upright, eyes wary. Felix didn't command her. He simply walked over, gently drew out the window, then sat on the floor a respectful distance away. "We'll have days like this," he said. "Memories don't vanish overnight. But you've already started to beat them." Rex stepped forward, paused, then another step. Finally, she sat beside him. Not pressed against. Just near. Felix smiled. "I guess that's a yes." That night, for the first time, Rex curled up at the foot of Felix's bed. Not to guard, not to monitor the exit, just to sleep. And Felix, for the first time in many months, didn't dream of the rock slide. In a cabin deep in the forest, a man and a creature once broken by the world were starting over together from the ashes. Monday morning, the wind from the ocean swept deep into the Olympic forest, carrying with it moisture and the scent of salt. Felix woke up early as always, but this time there was a new sound. The quiet footsteps of Rex approaching him before he even turned on the light. No need to call. She was awake, ready, or at least trying. Felix opened the back door, letting her roam freely through the dew-wet backyard. He stood on the porch, hot coffee in hand, watching the silent silhouette move through the brush, pausing at every old deer trail. Rex sniffed carefully. Ghost-like, no darting, no panic. But when a dry branch cracked under a deer's hoof in the distance, she froze, her whole body tense. Felix stepped down unhurried. "It's all right," he said calmly. "Nothing exploded. No one's shouting at you." Rex looked at him a long, silent gaze, then slowly exhaled. Deep, as if she too had just passed a test. That afternoon, Felix drove Rex to the weekly ranger strategy meeting at the main station. These meetings usually covered weather updates, landslide risks, and preparation for peak tourist seasons. But this time, he had a different goal. He wanted Marcus to see Rex in a real environment. The room fell silent when Felix walked in with Rex. Emily, a young but experienced ranger, known for her skill in first aid and search coordination, raised an eyebrow. "So this is the legendary number 83. Felix nodded. Rex. Rex sat quietly at his feet, watching everyone. No barking, no growling, but also no submission. She was silent like a shadow present, without disrupting. Marcus said nothing throughout the meeting. But afterward, he called Felix into his office. "She's calmer than I expected," he said, taking off his glasses and setting them on the table. "But I still need a reason to accept her as part of the team. It's not that I hate dogs, I've just seen the broken ones. And I've seen people die for trusting them again." Felix didn't react with anger. He simply handed over a behavioral log he'd kept over the past 2 weeks. Sleep patterns, reaction to sudden sounds, recovery benchmarks after stress triggers, and more importantly, her ability to self-regulate after anxiety spikes. "She's not a tool," Felix said, eyes steady. "She's a teammate. But I understand if you need proof, I'll give it to you, in action." Marcus nodded after a few seconds of silence. "I'll allow it. One chance." That chance came the very next day. An alert from a local mountaineering group. A woman missing on the Timber Ridge Trail, an area still closed due to unmelted snow and high risk of landslides. Hazard warning, treacherous terrain, no helicopter support due to low cloud cover. It was going to be a ground rescue hours long, maybe an all-nighter. Marcus looked at Felix. "You want to take Rex?" Felix looked at Rex. She stood beside him, tail still, eyes sharp and calm like a glassy lake. "She's ready," he said. Rex was the wild card, but no one on the team trusted her completely yet. Emily glanced at Felix as they prepared to move out. "I hope you're right, because if you're not, someone's not coming back." Felix didn't respond, but as they trekked through forest-scaled rock clefts and edged around unstable slopes, Rex stayed ahead, each step deliberate. She sniffed the air, tracked blood mixed with mud, and stopped beneath a tree scorched by lightning. She looked up at Felix, then turned her head toward the left side of the cliff. "What's over there?" Emily asked. Felix didn't answer. He unclipped the leash and nodded. "Go, Rex." And she led. For the first time, the entire team witnessed a dog working like she was born for it, not out of command, but from instinct and trust. Rex led the team down an almost invisible path, winding through broken rocks and the remnants of fallen branches. Mountain winds howled past the cliffs, pushing damp, cold air into their lungs. But Rex remained unfazed. Her ears were fixed forward, shifting slightly with each indistinct echo between wind and trees. "Are we sure about this?" Emily whispered, voice tense. "I don't see any sign at all." Felix nodded, eyes locked on Rex. "She sees it." And at that moment Rex stopped. In front of them was a narrow ravine, moss-covered stones slick as oil. Below was a dense canopy of forest trees concealing anything that might be visible from above. Rex looked down, her front paw stepping forward, then suddenly barked, not aggressively, but as if signaling. Felix dropped to one knee beside her. "Someone down there." "Rex," she barked again, firmer this time. Her eyes gleamed as if she could see through the veil of leaves. Emily flicked on her flashlight, aiming down the slope. "Wait, I see something. A hat." Red Felix immediately called the station, transmitting coordinates. Marcus confirmed and gave the order for support deployment. But time wasn't on their side. A heavy storm was approaching fast, and if the woman below was injured, she might not last a few more hours. "We're going down," Felix decided. "Hold on, that's a sheer drop." "You'll need ropes," Emily warned. Felix already had his harness on. "I've climbed worse back in Montana. I need Rex to guide me right to the edge and then stay up here to act as a signal marker." He turned and crouched to Rex's level, taking her face in both hands. "Listen, Rex, I'm going down. You have to wait here. Bark if I go off track or if someone else comes." "Got it." Rex tilted her head, then in a gesture, strange for a dog once so traumatized, she stepped forward and gently touched her nose to Felix's forehead. No scratching, no barking, just a soft contact, a silent affirmation. Felix smiled. "Good girl. You're my teammate now." The descent was breathlessly quiet. The wind picked up, slapping cold droplets into his skin. His leather gloves were soaked every slip, a potential fatal error. But Felix didn't waver, because he believed Rex had seen what no one else could. And she had. When his boots hit the ground, his flashlight swept across, and a figure appeared under the trees, a woman lying on her side, face-pale hand clutching her backpack like a final lifeline. She was alive, but her breathing was faint, and her eyes closed. "She's here," Felix shouted. "Call in the medics." Above, Rex began to bark long, strong calls, echoing through the valley. She couldn't see Felix anymore, but she knew the mission was complete. The signal had been sent. And when the distant wail of sirens finally reached her ears, the rescue team approaching Rex stopped barking. She lay down at the edge of the cliff, resting her head on her front paws, eyes fixed on the vast darkness below, waiting. For the first time in her life, Rex no longer needed to hide. When Felix and the woman securely strapped to the rescue stretcher were pulled up from the ravine by the medical team, Rex was already standing at the edge of the cliff, not barking, not jumping, just waiting. The beam of a headlamp lit up Felix's face as he looked up and saw her. For the first time, his eyes were no longer those of a ranger, but of a friend. A man who had been saved not by the system or a map, but by the instincts and unwavering will of a creature once deemed irreparable. "She's safe," Felix whispered, reaching out to gently stroke Rex's head. "All thanks to you." Rex lowered her ears, but didn't flinch like she once had. Instead, she touched her nose to Felix's soaking wet glove, a simple gesture that held all the trust they had built over the past days. Back at the ranger station, under a misty dawn rain, the entire team was exhausted. Emily yawned deeply, setting Caesar down near the stove to dry his thick fur. Marcus stepped out of his office, a steaming cup of coffee in hand. Felix and Rex stood in the center of the room, soaked, their boots and jackets caked in mud. Yet all eyes in the station turned toward them, not with curiosity, but with a quiet kind of respect. Marcus set his cup down and walked forward. "We got the signal from the medics. The victim is en route to the hospital. Stable condition." He looked at Felix, and I heard the first to locate her was a dog that had once been classified for disposal. Felix nodded, glancing at Rex. "That's right." Marcus smiled faintly. No theatrics, no speeches. He walked to a cabinet, unlocked it, and retrieved a small box. From inside, he pulled out a metal tag, a nameplate engraved with the words, "Rex, Olympic SR Unit." He held it out to Felix. "I think it's time she had an official title." Felix took the tag and turned to Rex. "You hear that? They just confirmed you're part of the team." Rex stood tall. She didn't understand the words engraved on the metal, but she understood the tone of voice. She understood Felix's heartbeat. And she understood that this, for the first time in her life, meant she was called teammate. Not a tool. Not K9 Baser 83. Not broken. Just Rex. Felix crouched down and gently clipped the new tag around Rex's neck, replacing the emotionless serial number collar from the training center. As the soft jingle of metal sounded, Rex instinctively lifted her head, her eyes shining with something that wasn't instinct. It was awareness. Emily stepped forward, smiling. "Welcome to the team, Rex." Rex responded by quietly sitting beside Felix, leaning her shoulder against his leg, as if claiming new ground. A base, a home, a friend. Marcus gave Felix a light pat on the shoulder before heading back to his office. "Keep her close, Felix," he said without turning. "That kind of grit is rarer than any training badge." On her new tag, glinting under the station lights, there was only one simple line. But for Rex, it marked the start of a life forever changed. Rex, search and rescue partner, confirmed. That night, a heavy storm hit Olympic National Park, as if the entire sky had suddenly lost its temper. The wind howled violently through the ancient trees, rocking the porch of the ranger station. No prior warning. No time to prepare. At 1:43 a.m., the emergency alarm rang through the station. A young couple long-distance hikers had been reported missing near Clear Lake, an isolated area with treacherous terrain, especially dangerous after heavy rain. Felix woke the moment the landline rang. He leapt up as if his body had been pre-programmed from countless past rescue calls. Rex raised her head from the mat near the fireplace, ears alert, eyes questioning, but not panicked. Felix pulled on his coat while speaking quickly into the phone. "Last known location at marker, 16 landslide terrain." "Got it. I'm heading out in 15 minutes. He hung up and knelt next to Rex. Voice low, 2 people, 1 injured. The storm has knocked out cell service. No helicopter support. We go on foot. Rex didn't bark. She simply stood, walked to the door, and waited for him to open it. No hesitation. The night march began. The rain pounded down like stones, drilling into his coat, soaking through every layer. Mud sucked at his boots. His headlamp barely pierced the dark path that twisted like a maze. Felix carried a map, a GPS unit, and a first aid kit. But in this moment, the most important tool was the creature leading him. Rex. They reached the trailhead at Clear Trail by 2:18 a.m. Felix held out a thin red jacket left behind by the hikers for Rex to smell human scent, damp mud, sweat, and the earthy tang of the forest. "Find them," Felix whispered. "Find them." Rex inhaled deeply, then walked straight into the woods. The search lasted nearly 2 hours. Wind tore down brittle branches, trails were flooded. But Rex didn't stop. She weaved through fallen logs, pausing to sniff the air disturbed by shifting wind. Felix followed, panting, soaked to the bone, eyes fixed on her swaying tail, a blind man, chasing a beacon. At a slope where the earth had partially given way, Rex suddenly stopped. She turned to Felix, then dashed down the incline. Felix ran after her, shouting, "Rex, careful!" He slipped, tumbling nearly 5 meters. When he stopped, he saw Rex standing on a rocky ledge, barking twice a sound, both alert and affirmative. Below them were 2 figures, a man and a woman. The woman had an injured leg curled beneath a torn raincoat. The man clung to her, shivering, his breath shallow. When Felix's flashlight swept over them, the man burst into tears. "Please, her leg, we're so cold." Felix immediately unpacked the first aid kit, unrolled rope, and radioed the station. Found them. Western slide zone by the lake. Female with fractured leg, both showing signs of hypothermia, requesting extraction. While waiting for help, Rex didn't leave the woman's side. She lay down beside her, the heat of her thick coat serving as a living blanket. The woman placed her hand on Rex's neck, tears spilling freely. It's like she knows I'm in pain," the woman whispered. Felix nodded gently. "She does. She's been in pain too." When the rescue team arrived at first light, they were met with a scene no one would ever forget. A Malinois lying protectively beside the patient like a silent sentinel, her eyes watchful yet tender. A ranger, mud-streaked and soaked, standing tall, eyes never leaving his teammate. And in the cold heart of the forest, one shared breath had been preserved by those once deemed not good enough. The remnants of last night's storm lingered, not just in the soaked tree trunks or the slick mud paths, but in the pounding rhythm still echoing in Felix's chest and in the altered gleam of Rex's eyes. That morning, the ranger station hosted a high-intensity mock search and rescue drill, the final evaluation before officially enlisting teams into the regional rapid response roster. The exercise included disruptive elements, simulated gunfire, mock seismic explosions, smoke, and unpredictable behavior from role players acting as victims. Felix was prepared. He trusted Rex. But when they were assigned to the simulation zone near the western cliffside terrain, reminiscent of the military training ground where she had once been injured, something tightened in his chest. Rex jumped out of the vehicle as usual, steady, focused. But as they approached the training site, the first sound hit. A boom not deafening, but echoing off the cliffs, doubling back in a jarring ricochet. Rex froze. Her entire body stiffened. Ears dropped. Tail lowered close to her hind legs. Breathing quickened. Her golden eyes dilated, scanning wildly, as if searching for an invisible escape route. Felix knelt beside her immediately. No commands. No pulling on the lead. "Rex," he said softly, "this isn't real. You're not there anymore. You're with me. Right here. Right now." Rex trembled. Another mock gunshot rang out. She sank to the ground, belly pressed flat against the dirt. No howling, no barking, just shaking. Felix didn't touch her. He placed his hand palm down on the earth beside her, like an anchor of safety. "No one will force you to run through wire fences anymore. No one will shout at you. No one will strike you. This is Olympic Forest. I'm Felix. I'm the one who's with you." 5 minutes passed in silence, a silence as heavy as stone. Then Rex slowly raised her head, her ears lifted. She glanced toward Felix. That look was no longer one of pure fear. In it was awareness, a flicker of hope for guidance. Felix gave a nod, light as a breeze. "All right, Rex, your choice. If you go on, I'll go with you." Rex stood. still trembling slightly. But she stood. She looked ahead at the drifting smoke where the role-playing victim waited to be found. And then she moved. Not sprinting, not gliding, but walking steady steps over ground that echoed with memories. Felix followed, saying nothing more. As they neared the target, Rex began to pick up pace, her body gradually returning to its familiar rhythm. She located the victim, a trainer sitting and feigning disorientation, face smeared with fake blood and dirt. Rex did not hesitate. She approached, sat beside them, and gave one clear bark to signal discovery. Then she turned to look at Felix, as if awaiting confirmation. Felix couldn't hide his emotion. He reached out and gently touched her collar, the first physical contact of the entire training session. Well done, Rex. So, well done. Back at the station, a trainer stood waiting by the gate, watching them return. You know, he said, a dog that can move through the memory of explosions and still perform her role, that's not just recovery. That's victory. Felix gave a small nod. He glanced at Rex, now striding strong, her damp fur reflecting the dappled forest light, and smiled. 3 days after the final training drill, the rain still hadn't let up. Autumn in Olympic was always like this, persistent, damp, and unpredictable. Felix had just finished his weekly report when the radio on his desk suddenly burst with urgent signals. Central Station here. Emergency search alert at Fog Hollow Canyon. Report of landslide after heavy rain. 3 people missing. One of them is an 8-year-old child. Possibility of entrapment or burial. Say our teams stand by for deployment instructions. Felix jumped to his feet. No one had to remind him he grabbed the backpack long prepared for that day. But what mattered most now was Rex's eyes. She stood right by the door tail, twitching legs bent in readiness. No command needed. She knew today wasn't practice. Today was real. Fog Hollow was among the most treacherous areas in the park, basin-like terrain. Soft soil roots twined around bedrock, narrow trails, easily severed when flash floods came. Time was the enemy. If the missing were trapped after the landslide, every passing minute meant one less chance of survival. Felix drove as if gliding through fog. Rain pelted the windshield in torrents. Rex sat in the passenger seat, harness strapped to the seat, but eyes never leaving the window. She didn't tremble. She wasn't afraid. She knew she was needed. At the scene, it was chaos. The trail had been erased by over 100 meters of thick mud. Broken branches blocked paths, and the ground was so saturated it could barely hold a step. A panicked, middle-aged man knelt in the mud, tears mixing with rain repeating over and over. My girl, she's still there. I couldn't pull her out. Felix placed a hand on his shoulder. We'll find her. If there's a chance, we won't leave it behind. He turned to Rex, pulled a child's shirt fragment from his bag. The last known scent of the missing girl, and held it to her nose. Rex, find. No hesitation. No extra word needed. Rex launched off the ground like an arrow. She skimmed across the mud, leapt onto surviving stones, lowered herself to the ground. Her nose worked relentlessly. Felix followed at a distance far enough not to disturb the wind currents. 5 minutes. 10 minutes. No sign. Rex looped back, adjusted her trajectory, climbed a small slope, then suddenly froze. Her ears snapped upright. She turned to Felix and barked twice the signal scent detected. Not strong, not clear, but there. Felix scrambled up beside her. Rex had started digging, not frantically, methodically, as if she understood that time was blood and breath. Felix joined her. His hands shook from cold and adrenaline. Mud splattered his face, even his eyes. But he didn't stop. 3 minutes later, Beneath the slurry of wet earth, a faint gasp. "Someone! Don't!" Felix yelled, "Found her alive." The rescue team surged in. Tools passed hand to hand like wildfire. Soon after, they pulled a small girl out of the collapsed dirt. She was wrapped in a thermal blanket placed on a stretcher oxygen mask pressed to her face. Her eyes cracked open. She whispered. The dog was there. She didn't bark. She just lay next to me. Felix turned to look at Rex. She stood a few steps away, legs caked in mud fur, matted and soaked. But she was still statue-like eyes locked on the child until she was loaded onto the ambulance. That day, they found 2 more people, thanks to secondary traces Rex discovered. But it was that first act, locating and comforting a child buried in mud and darkness, that left everyone silent. No loud praise, no applause. Only this: when Felix returned to the ranger station with Rex, the eyes that met theirs were solemn, filled with respect and something like gratitude. A dog once labeled discarded. A ranger carrying old scars he never spoke of. Now they were a certified rescue team, and a legend was quietly being written in every step, every search, every life, pulled back from the brink. And so a new chapter began. Not just recovery, but a journey into the most dangerous places not to fight, but to find, and to bring life back. The story of Rex and Felix is not a heroic epic bathed in glorious light. It is a low, resonant note, quiet, honest, and filled with fragments of both trauma and healing. Neither of them began this journey as a hero. One was broken by the weight of a life he couldn't save. The other was discarded for daring to react when pushed beyond the limit. But when these 2 lost souls found each other, something once thought dead began to stir again trust. From what seemed like a meaningless encounter at a quiet auction, Rex, the Malinois once deemed unrecoverable, is now the first name called in rescue missions, through deep forests, snowfields, and darkness. Felix the ranger, who once blamed himself into silence, now stands tall beside his 4-legged companion, so that each step forward is no longer a form of atonement, but a gift. They don't need to speak much. They simply show up at the most dangerous, most uncertain, most unforgiving places. And there, hope still has a chance to be awakened. Because not everyone who gets lost is gone. And not everyone who's been discarded is worthless. All it takes is someone willing to look deeper past the scars, into the uncertain eyes, and whisper, "I see you. I believe in you." Felix and Rex didn't save the world, but they saved each other. And from that, they saved countless other little worlds too.